Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and over the past couple of expansions, Blizzard has been doing a little bit more experimenting when it comes to regular in-game content, from Plunderstorm, which is going to be arriving very soon in 11.05, but also more recently, Mists of Pandaria Remix. While Plunderstorm was more PvP oriented, Remix was more PvE oriented, giving players an opportunity to earn a bunch of cosmetics, new as well as old Pandaria cosmetics, even some of the rarest items out there, while embracing a pure power fantasy within the frame of the World of Warcraft combat and systems. And the recent interviews ever since the Warcraft Direct hint that Legion Remix is on the horizon for us in the future. Like Mists of Pandaria, Legion as an expansion was a very memorable expansion for so many players out there, with many claiming that this was their ultimate favorite WoW experience, with some of the most epic and explosive in-game lore, to the various artifact weapons and the power gains the players made through a variety of different legendaries, through the insane amount of deep content that was added throughout that entire experience. So today I wanted to go over why I think we need to experience the expansion of Legion all over again through yet another remix experience, which will hopefully get some more information at some point in the near future. As always, if you guys want to see more regular updates like these for War with an Expansion or other content we'll talk about on the channel, be sure to follow and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive back into what Legion could offer us. When playing through Mists of Pandaria Remix, which was a ton of fun, and I'm so sorry for everybody else out that missed it for one reason or another, but Mists of Pandaria Remix was the best time to re-experience Mists of Pandaria content all over again, from its storylines to side quests to the zones themselves to the dungeons, the raids themselves, and all the other pieces of content. And I think the only thing we were missing is maybe the challenge mode dungeons, but everything else was available and there and was a ton of fun to play through. Another best part was the cosmetics, through the cloak upgrades, which also give you different cloaks, but also purchasing new mogs for the bronze currency, and a second chance to earn some of the rarest mounts, armor sets, and even things such as the Garrosh shoulders through Mop Remix, which I did luck out on earning those before Mop Remix even came out, just by accident on my death knight. But for everybody else who's been farming for these shoulders for months and potentially even multiple expansions now, everybody else actually got a chance to finally earn those. All you have to do is kill Garrosh a set amount of times, but it was a great opportunity for you to collect so many different little cosmetics for all of the rarest items that you could either, I guess, RNG out over on the live realms or work towards over on the remix realms, which I thought was a fantastic addition. But also, the power fantasy of Mop Remix was a ton of fun. It started out a little slow because it took a little bit of while, and the gear upgrade system with bronze took a little bit too expensive to upgrade all of your items, especially if you wanted to mostly spend all your bronze on all of the different cosmetics. So if they do end up doing that type of system with bronze and gear upgrades going forward, I do hope they will rethink some of the prices, but either way, it was a ton of fun. Once your character got rolling with the best of the best gems, best of the best weapons, and then eventually you get your cloak upgraded so much that your character became a literal god on the battlefield with so much health, so many secondaries, and absolutely zero chance of you to ever dying to a single enemy, and no matter how difficult of a raid or a dungeon you were about to tackle, and create some truly overpowered characters, which I love the power fantasy of any expansion, especially towards the tail end of an expansion, where they were talking about expansions like BFA with its corruption gear definitely had a real power fantasy feel about it, or Legion being another expansion where there was a lot of power fantasy between the different legendaries and artifact weapons and how you could upgrade those infinitely. And Legion, I think, would be the best place for that pure power fantasy. Where in Mists of Pandaria we got cloaks as well as gems to swap out in our gear, Legion Remix could go in a completely different direction in a more familiar system that it actually utilized when the expansion was concurrent content, and that is through its legendaries, where the Mists of Pandaria gems allowed you to obtain a variety of different powerful effects. Each character got to feel very strong and also pretty customizable, and there were so many different combinations of gems that you could put together in order to create the best healer build, tank build, DPS build, or even a hybrid build if you wanted to. And legendaries were very similar to that type of power, but most of them were very spec and even class specific, with a bunch of familiar effects that we've seen in the past that eventually were turned into talents that we now have in our class talent trees. Where Legion really stood out from the rest, however, where similar to that of Shadowlands, is those legendaries were incredibly strong, which was the whole point of getting a legendary. But where it really picked up speed in terms of that pure power progression is when you got to equip 2 of them. And these legendaries, all of them were very, very potent and very powerful back in the day. So just going from an upgrade of just 1 legendary to 2 of them was incredibly strong. But what if for Mists of Pandaria Remix, instead of doing 1 or 2 legendaries, what if you could equip 1 in every single slot on your gear? Because every class has a wide variety of different effects that they could equip, from some of the more generic legendaries that they could equip in the next slots, ring slots, trinket slots even, but then there's also spec-specific ones as well that have unique effects that interacted with some of the other specific aspects of each and every one of our classes. And the creativity with legendaries was also really fun to experiment back in Legion, because a lot of players got to create a bunch of different sets. Warriors in particular, as well as demon hunters, got to create a speed set where they used legendaries that didn't necessarily increase the combat potential, but increased the mobility greatly, to the point where they could utilize it in things like older raids or older dungeons to farm out all of their mounts as well as cosmetics from those instances. Players were able to create AoE class sets and single target class sets with legendaries, and could even switch out between them in content like Mythic Plus dungeons, where you can still switch out gear in those kind of content. People got to make survivability sets, which were incredibly potent. Legendaries for every situation was basically their intended design at the time, and I imagine if they could just fill the legendary pool with even more generic legendaries that every class could access, similar to how they had a variety of different gems in Mists of Pandaria Remix, you could make so many different sets for players to collect and optimize for. Another big component of Mists of Pandaria Remix, where a lot of players gained a ton of their power, was from their cloaks and being able to progress and upgrade their cloak with the threads earned from open world and instance content. And Legion Remix could follow a very similar trend of such upgrades, but instead swap it through something more familiar, being your artifact weapon, which previously had a variety of different talents within the talent tree, most of which did end up becoming some kind of a passive or some kind of an active ability within our current class design and class talents, especially if you look at the 2 specs of Demon Hunter in particular, which is where they drew a lot of their ideas from when customizing their talent tree. But there was a mix of this visual progression, but also power progression within the artifact weapons, because even those original artifact weapons had infinitely stacking components, especially as you unlock more traits of that artifact weapon down the line in future patches. So the weapon itself, what I'm saying is, could directly replace the cloak, where instead of earning threats for the cloak, you can still be earning AP artifact power for your artifact weapon of Legion Remix, where instead of upgrading your cloak to infinite potential, you could upgrade your weapon to infinite potential, which I imagine would be insanely strong for many of the melee classes out there, since majority of them scale super well from weapons directly. Another best part about Mists of Pandaria Remix was the ability to re-experience it all over again, from a variety of different storylines to all the different zones, all the instances. And I think Legion in particular is another expansion that has a breadth of content for players to re-experience, especially when it comes to the replayability of class order halls. Each class order hall has a unique storyline, with the only one that would be missing, however, is the Evoker, since they never really had a class order hall. I don't know if they would be able to potentially add an Evoker order hall, and I wonder if they did do a Legion remix, if the order halls would even play a big part, but I mean, they probably would, and they probably should, because there's so much content in there specifically. From unique storylines for each and every class, from how you acquire your artifact weapon, as well as all the different chapters of that storyline as well. The unique activities of each order hall that were specifically tailored for every single one of the classes in the game. From the different artifact weapon questlines that are all very epic and unique, from the ways you obtain the weapon, to the final chapter of the rogue, to the final chapter of your order hall questline, the Broken Shore questline, where every single class had a new unique mount for you to unlock, with every quest being very different. I haven't completed every single mount quest for the order hall campaigns, but for the rogues in particular, it was very different than everybody else. And the rogue Broken Shore questline for me in particular was so memorable, but it was also very unique, as it involved you visiting the opposing factions' capital cities, which means there was always the looming threat of you potentially being caught out by guards or other players ready for PvP. So as part of this risk with your specially unique mission, but essentially you had to get into one of these capital cities and eliminate 4 contacts that were allied with the Legion. In Stromwood, you had to go to the heart of the capital and slay an auctioneer and vanish out of sight, so it was a quick in and out mission that tested your ability to perform a hit and run. In Ironforge, Warforged, you had a target that was ironclad in some of the best armor and that took very little damage from your dagger strikes and sword slashes, but that were very prevalent to bleeds and poisons, so you had to spec to assassination and improvise. In Darnassus, there was a big party, and your target is usually mingling with the party goers, but at some point they get separated from them for a short moment, and that is your opportunity to strike, which that mission tested your ability to patiently wait until your target is in the best position. And in Exodar, your target was supported by a bodyguard, and you either had to crowd control the bodyguard to make sure that you can actually kill your current target, or find a moment where they're separated for a quick second for a yet another hit and run. And every one of these missions had something different required from your rogue in order to be able to eliminate your target in the fastest way possible, while also not being caught by guards or other players. And this is all on top of all the different in-game content that we had during the expansion of Legion, specifically from the massive pool of dungeons, including the mega dungeon of Return to Karazhan, as well as the raids and so many different world bosses that Legion had access to at the time. It was actually an impressive and an amazing experience with just how much stuff you could do in this expansion all on its own, outside of just the order halls, but also within some of the group content that most players expect. The last thing Mists of Pandaria I think did really well is the number of cosmetics that it brought with it, from so many different vendors filled to the brim with items for you to earn and work towards, which was the best part. Collecting bronze from open world and group activities and then spending it to buy some of the most sought after items was, I think, a very awesome experience. From unique never before seen items such as the Shadowpan garb, the Pandaria starting zone leveling items, which was really fun to reacquire, recolors of some of the different class sets, and even class weapons from the trading depots, achievement-based rewards like the backpacks, as well as even cosmetic mounts. So many different rare mounts on the vendors and class tier sets for you to collect, and even old Siege of Orgrimmar heirlooms, which I made sure to collect as many of them as possible because, I mean, they were really good for when it comes to early leveling with those gem sockets, but also just the unique appearances on these items. I was really happy that they brought it back into the game. And Legion as an expansion, I think, is no slouch in that department either, as there's so many different cosmetics. One of them being one of the easiest ones to take a look at is some of the different artifact weapon appearances. Like going back and having to reacquire some of these appearances from back in the day, like imagine having to do the Balance of Power story questline all over again. It takes a little bit of time, it is a bit of a pain. But if they could potentially restructure how you acquire some of these skins to very similarly how you acquire different cloaks from Mists of Pandaria Remix, so just by playing the game and powering up your weapons instead of powering up your cloak, you can unlock all of these different appearances. I think that'll be an awesome touch as well. As well as so many different class sets for players to uncover from the expansion of Legion, and there were so many good class sets from back in the day, from the actual Order Hall sets, which are very similar to Mists of Pandaria sets, to some of the different raiding sets and even PvP sets, to the Trial of Valor sets. We have the Tomb of Sargeras recolors of the original TBC sets, and even the Burning Throne sets as well. Though another piece of content I think could potentially be revisited for a Legion remix is also possibly the Mage Tower. Now, I doubt that they would bring back the Mage Tower weapon appearances, even though a lot of players would want to see them return, because there was an opportunity for them to do the same for the Mists of Pandaria challenge mode sets, and they never did that, so I'm assuming they're probably not going to do the same, but maybe they'll change their mind. Maybe there'll be enough community to push back against the idea where they may just be like, alright, let's bring it in. Let's finally add him back into the game. If anything though, what they could totally do for the Mage Tower with the return of the Mage Tower is to bring in new weapons instead. Because technically back in Legion, a lot of players found that there was some data mined artifact weapon appearances that never got implemented. A handful of those classes still have those in the game files, and they never seen the light of day, and the return of Legion Remix with a brand new Mage Tower challenge could be that opportunity for them to bring something like this back into the forefront and give everybody another chance to unlock a brand new appearance for some of their weapons. For druids in particular, because they don't necessarily get to appreciate the transmogs of their weapons, but instead they could maybe get a new bear form and a cat form into their Mage Tower. Kind of like what they brought the Legion Mage Tower back during the update in Shadowlands, where they gave everybody a fell werebear form, where players that played back in Legion got the original form, now get this fell new one, but also players that never got to play it back in the day can also unlock at least a variation of the fell werebear form. And there's a lot of Pharaoh players that would love to get a chance to maybe get a modified version of the Star Kitty form, because it has this unique trail that it leaves, and it has a bit more of a whimsical appearance to it that definitely stands out from some of the other forms that druids have gotten, like during the update for the Emerald Dream, where they got a bunch of cat forms, but none of them really are as cool as the original Mage Tower version. And I wonder if they could do something very similar in the same style of appearance, but not quite the same. Something where older players that got the original can also now go back and get this new version, but also players that never got the original, never even had the chance, and they kind of lucked out on being able to even obtain it, can now go back and get a different variation of a similar appearance as well. It will give players yet another opportunity to travel back into the Mage Tower, though this time empowered with a new type of artifact weapon, as well as all these different legendaries to eventually overcome the challenge. Very similar to how players did it back in Legion, where in the early days, the challenge was very difficult. You didn't have a lot of gear, and only the best of the best players out there that were really strict with the mechanics and played it perfectly to a T were able to eventually overcome all of these fights to skill and sheer will. But later, as the expansion went on, it got easier for many more players to claim their artifact appearances, as well as you got better legendaries and even double legendaries and even just catch-up gear. A lot of players were able to go diving back into the Mage Tower appearance, which was made a little bit easier through the sheer amount of gear and the additional survivability through legendaries, and had a little bit of an easier time earning those weapons. And it would definitely left a memorable experience for so many players back in the day. And if every single class and spec in the game got a unique weapon for you to unlock, then everybody, whether you played back in the day or haven't, would have another reason to dive back into the Legion Mage Tower experience and Legion Remix in general to collect yet another unique appearance to add to your collection. But with that, that is going to be my full list of reasons why we need to have a Legion Remix. So far, it's only been teased, but I'm so excited to see what the future holds and exactly how it'll shape and how it'll look going forward, and hopefully we'll be able to test it at some point in the near future. As always though, I do want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys did enjoy this video. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate it. Also, join our Discord community for more regular War Within updates, and let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. Would you want to see Legion Remix, and exactly how would you want them to structure Legion Remix in the future if they were to do it? And as always, I'll see all of you guys in the next one.